A group of rappers bring life on the streets to the ears of the world, a heavy metal band goes behind the Iron Curtain, and hair metal brings an end to the Cold War. I'm J.C.Hollywood, and those are just some of the things that happened this week in the 80s. On the 8th of the 8th, 1988, one of the most influential hip-hop albums of all time was released when NWA launched their first studio album, Straight Outta Compton. The record, considered by many to be the first gangster rap album, became a worldwide hit, reaching triple platinum in the US despite receiving almost no radio airplay. The band's social commentary and anti-law enforcement message struck a chord with listeners, and the parental advisory warning sticker that accompanied the album might just as well have been a "Buy Me Now" sticker. When the FBI sent them a letter expressing their displeasure at the advocacy of violence on the album, well, that just stoked the fires of their success even higher. Although considered by many to be one of the pioneering albums of gangster rap, for the members of NWA, what they were recording was just simply reality. Most of the songs were written by Ice Cube and MC Ren, with production by Dr. Dre. The album would be the group's only studio album with Ice Cube, with the rapper leaving the band just a year later. Iron Maiden took to the stage on August the 9th, 1984 in Warsaw, Poland, for the first show of their World Slavery Tour, a tour that would see them play 189 shows in 331 days, and in the process they became one of the first bands to travel behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. The show was an ambitious spectacle filled with pyrotechnics, various stage props, and a 30-foot tall mummified statue of Eddie, the band's zombie-like mascot. They were, at various stages of the tour, supported by bands like Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, and Wasp, to name just a few, as they made their way across Europe, North and South America, Japan, and Australia. But not New Zealand, where they had to cancel their 3 planned shows. Eventually, on July the 5th, 1985, the band played the final date of the tour in Irvine, California, exhausted and shattered. Lead singer Bruce Dickinson went on to say that it was the best tour we ever did and it was the worst, adding that it nearly finished them off for good. Five years after Iron Maiden went behind the Iron Curtain, a group of heavy and hair metal acts went to the USSR for the 2-day Moscow Peace and Music Festival. It happened on August 11th and 12th, 1989. Organized by US rock manager Doc McGee, the festival saw acts like Ozzy Osbourne, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, and Skid Row attempt to bring Woodstock for the 80s to the waning Soviet Union as part of Gorbachev's Glasnost initiative. It was held in Lenin Stadium, an arena boycotted by American Olympians just 9 years previous. The bands that played there remembered the thousands that filled the arena as being a polite but incredibly enthusiastic crowd, coming not just to enjoy the music, but the music as a symbol of freedom. And while the shows were a triumph, behind the scenes the egos could barely be controlled. Bands bickered over who should play when, and many of them, particularly Motley Crue, were jealous over what they deemed to be preferential treatment for Bon Jovi. In the end, despite the success, both Motley Crue and Bon Jovi would go on to dump Doc McGee as their manager. 3 years after the release of its companion album, Pink Floyd's The Wall, the movie, hit cinemas on August the 6th, 1982. I say cinemas, but it was actually only released in one cinema, but despite that, it still managed to take $68,000 in its opening weekend, debuting at number 28 on the US box office. Over the next few months, it would expand its reach, playing in over 600 cinemas, as it climbed its way to number 3 at the box office, being held off by E.T. and An Officer and a Gentleman. The film, a somewhat depressing analysis of Roger Waters' Naval, was originally supposed to star Waters as the film's main protagonist, a musician named Pink, But by all accounts, Waters' screen test was not the best, and he was replaced with Boomtown Rats singer Bob Geldof. Rather than following a linear story path, the film meanders, heavy in symbolism and metaphor. And while director Alan Parker described the experience of making the film as one of the most miserable of his life, the artistry at the center of it is undeniable. It's not an enjoyable film, but it is a very, very good one. Here's a quick look at some of the other films that hit cinemas this week in the 80s. Masters of the Universe came out this week in 1987, and here's something you might not know about it. The film was made by Cannon Films, a production company that built its success making Chuck Norris films and feeding the burgeoning market for B-movies that sprung up with the arrival of VCRs. By 1987, though, the company was struggling, and they were pinning their hopes on two forthcoming films from their stable, Superman 4: A Quest for Peace, and Masters of the Universe. When both of those films bombed at the box office, though, things were looking dire. But Cannon had an idea. They would film a sequel to Masters of the Universe back to back with another film that they had the rights to, a little property called SpiderMan. Except they didn't own the rights to either of those properties anymore because they couldn't afford to pay for them. So now Cannon Films is left with millions of dollars worth of costumes, stages and props all ready to go, but no film to put in them. So what did they do? They just spent a week nutting out a new script that combined elements from both of the abandoned films and just made a new film. They cast a relatively new action star in it named Jean-Claude Van Damme, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how Cyborg came to be. And that is all we have time for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm J.C.Hollywood. I'll see you back here next week for more This Week in the 80s.